She once lit up the screen with twin smiles in The Parent Trap, but behind the scenes, Hayley Mills wasn't smiling. In fact, she would later admit that she hated one of her co-stars more than anyone she had ever worked with. That co-star was Brian Keith, the man who played her lovable father on screen. The truth? What happened between them would haunt Mills for decades, long after the cameras stopped rolling. This is the story of how Hollywood's golden child carried a secret pain and how it changed her forever. A star born into legacy, Hayley Catherine Rose Vivian Mills entered the world on April 18, 1946, with theatrical blood already coursing through her veins. Her father, Sir John Mills, was one of Britain's most respected actors. Her mother, Mary Hayley Bell, was a playwright and novelist with a sharp mind and a deep sense of story. Surrounded by art, literature, and performance from the moment she could speak, Hayley seemed destined for a life under the spotlight. At age 12, while attending boarding school, she caught the eye of director J. Lee Thompson. He cast her in Tiger Bay, 1959, where she starred opposite her real-life father. Her performance stunned critics, earning her a BAFTA award for Most Promising Newcomer. But that wasn't the most important fan she won. Sitting in the darkened screening room, Walt Disney himself was watching, and he was about to change her life. Disney's golden child, Hayley Mills would go on to become the face of Disney's live-action division in the early 1960s. Her first major role with the studio was the iconic Pollyanna, 1960, a performance that not only won hearts but also earned her a rare Academy Juvenile Award, essentially an Oscar for children. America fell in love with her. Next came The Parent Trap, 1961, where she played both Susan and Sharon, twin sisters separated at birth. With split-screen technology still in its infancy, the technical demands were intense, but Hayley pulled it off flawlessly. She wasn't just acting, she was performing a miracle for the camera. The film became a cultural phenomenon, but behind the polished Disney magic, trouble was already brewing. Clash of Titans, Mills versus Keith. Audiences saw a warm father-daughter relationship. What they didn't see was the tension simmering between Hayley Mills and Brian Keith. From their first days on set, the two clashed. Mills, raised in a tradition of British theatrical discipline, valued preparation and respect. Keith, known for his sardonic humor and brusque demeanor, didn't. He allegedly referred to her as the Golden Goose, mocking her status as Disney's darling. When she stumbled on a line during rehearsal, he rolled his eyes. Sometimes he openly belittled her in front of the crew. And then came the incident. During a particularly intense scene, Mills flubbed a line. Keith slammed a chair on the floor and stormed off set. He blamed her for ruining the scene. The set went silent. Mills was just 14 years old. The emotional impact was lasting. In interviews decades later, her voice would stiffen when asked about Keith. She chose her words carefully. He was difficult, she once said. In a private letter discovered years after the release of her memoir, she wrote, "He was the one person in this industry I truly could not forgive. Not for what he did, but for how small he made me feel." To the public, the experience was a dream come true. To Hayley, it was the moment she began questioning everything. Her talent, her confidence, her place in an industry that adored her and tore her down at the same time. Behind the cheerful facade promoted by Disney lay the truth of a teenager navigating a battlefield. Keith's behavior wasn't just unkind, it was corrosive. He never struck her, never screamed in public, but his steady stream of subtle humiliations chipped away at her sense of safety. She began to dread going to work each day. The studio's insistence on maintaining a fantasy meant no one was coming to rescue her from the nightmare unfolding behind the scenes. She couldn't speak out. What would that have meant? Being labeled as difficult? Losing her career? Even at such a young age, Mills understood the stakes. Silence, she thought, was survival. But silence didn't shield her from the psychological toll. Her confidence cracked, her self-worth shrank, and the emotional wounds left behind didn't fade with time. They festered. In a later interview, she said, I had to carry on smiling even when I was crying inside because everyone was watching and I couldn't let anyone see me break. It's a chilling reminder of how child stars were trained to suppress pain for the sake of appearances. The trauma wasn't just about one co-star, it was about being abandoned by the very system that was supposed to protect her. The damage seeped into her future work. Directors noted how she second-guessed herself. Co-stars would remark on her quiet demeanor, how she often held back. She had become a symbol of innocence, but that symbol no longer matched the person she was becoming. Taking on controversial roles, especially in Twisted Nerve, which delved into psychological darkness and taboo subjects, marked a turning point. Critics were divided, but Mills stood firm, determined to break from the polished perfection Disney had crafted around her. Her transition was met with resistance, especially from fans who wanted her frozen in time as Pollyanna or the mischievous twins of The Parent Trap. That resistance was painful. Interviews from the era often reflect a visible frustration in Mills, as though she were trying to scream through the veneer of her Disney smile. But she didn't scream, she acted, quietly and deliberately, letting her choices speak louder than words. Her marriage to Roy Bolting was equally polarizing. The 33-year age gap stirred public discomfort, and industry whispers suggested she was seeking a father figure after her fraught relationship with male authority on set. Perhaps that was partially true, but it was also a relationship rooted in shared ambition, storytelling, and creative exploration. Their unusual home, a centuries-old windmill, became a symbol of their equally unconventional romance. Professionally, Mills began experimenting with stage work, indie projects, and television roles that allowed her to show emotional maturity. She didn't shy away from vulnerability, even when scripts called for nudity or emotional extremes. She took risks that former child stars were often warned against, and while not every role was a success, each one pushed her further away from the shadow of her Disney past. And still, the press never let her forget who she once was. Every daring role came with a headline referencing Pollyanna. Every kiss on screen, every adult decision was scrutinized against the backdrop of her childhood stardom. It became exhausting, but Mills never allowed it to silence her. Her choice to embrace the full complexity of womanhood, despite being typecast as America's sweetheart, was an act of quiet defiance. Meanwhile, her role as a mother changed her perspective yet again, watching her son Crispian grow up with the pressures of fame, as the frontman of Kula Shaker, gave her a deeper understanding of her own past. She became more protective, more introspective, and more outspoken about the demands placed on young performers. Where others retreated into nostalgia, Mills confronted it, dissected it, and ultimately refused to be defined by it. Her legacy was no longer just about being Disney's darling, it was about surviving Disney's expectations. Her transformation was not just physical or professional, it was spiritual. With every risky role, every public statement, every choice to live on her terms, Hayley Mills rewrote her narrative. She was no longer a product of the system. She was a woman reclaiming her story. The marriage didn't last. By 1977, Mills and Bolting divorced. She then entered a long-term relationship with actor Lee Lawson and gave birth to a second son, Jason. Again, the relationship was marked by creativity and companionship, but also ended in separation. Lawson went on to marry British supermodel Twiggy. Meanwhile, Mills focused on raising her children and rebuilding her career. Her return to the spotlight wasn't about chasing fame. It was about rediscovering purpose. In interviews during the 2000s, Mills often emphasized her love for the craft, not the attention. She found immense fulfillment in the intimacy of theater, where every performance was raw, real, and fleeting. Audiences weren't there for nostalgia, they were there for her. And that validation helped rebuild the confidence that had been chipped away in her youth. She also began mentoring younger actors, many of whom had grown up watching her in The Parent Trap or Pollyanna. She spoke openly about the mental and emotional toll of child stardom, warning them to guard their joy and remember that fame is fleeting, but self-worth must be nurtured. Her words carried the weight of someone who had lived it, survived it, and emerged with scars that had finally begun to heal. What made Mills truly extraordinary wasn't just her comeback, it was her clarity. She had finally found peace, not by rewriting the past, but by reclaiming her voice. In a world obsessed with reinvention, Hayley Mills embraced reflection. And through that, she became more than a former Disney star. She became a symbol of endurance. The tension with Brian Keith was never truly resolved. It was more than a clash of personalities. It was a power imbalance that left a teenage girl feeling small in a world that expected her to shine. While Keith's life ended in tragedy, he died by his own hand in 1997, Mills never publicly expressed hatred, but she never forgave him either. In that final letter she wrote, "He made me question my worth at the height of my stardom, and that's something I never forgot." The world saw Hayley Mills as the smiling girl in a Disney fantasy. But behind the scenes, she endured more than anyone knew. She weathered criticism, emotional abuse, and heartbreak, all while growing up on screen. Today, her story serves as a cautionary tale about the hidden cost of child stardom and a reminder, not every smile you see in Hollywood is real.